Hello, and welcome to the Commander Theory podcast. I'm Nick Beatman, and I'm here with my friend, Zak Mack.
Hello, theorists.
Today, we've got a very special guest, Ken Nagle.
Hey, everyone.
Ken has led the design for over a dozen expansions and is the current representative for Green in the Council of Colors within Wizards of the Coast's R&D. It's great to have you on the show, Ken.
It's great to be here, Nick and Zak. Look forward to talking about my favorite color of Magic cards.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking all about Green in Commander, its strengths, its weaknesses, its power level relative to the other colors, and how Wizards is working to balance the color within the limits of the modern color pie. So I guess before we jump into the topic of Green in Commander, can you tell us what it means to be the Green representative on the Council of Colors? What's the Council, and what are your responsibilities?
All right, so the Council of Colors was created by Mark Rosewater a few years ago now, when it was too big of a job to keep track of the color pie in the game by one person, namely Mark Rosewater. Notably, I led the first Commander product, which had cards in it that he had never seen before, like Chaos Warp. And since he was beholden to make sure the color pie stayed true, it became a bigger job than just one person. And so to be nice and flavorful and compartmentalize everything, there's now 5 council members. There's also a colorless person to have an opinion on that matter. But for each council member, we have a color. I'm in charge of green, and I get to make sure that all the green cards at least pass through my eyes and try to make sure that we're not doing too many things off color for the color. We make sure that each set is different, right? Some sets lean towards artifacts, which is a bizarre thing for green to do, but that set would have to have only the artifact happy green cards, and then we would return to normal, right, where green actually doesn't like artifacts anymore, right? So every set to feel a little different has to wiggle around, but we try to make sure there's a through line that doesn't veer too far off. So we like to call them bends when you can meander off and then return. We like to call them breaks when it's too far and you're actually doing something that shouldn't be done.
I want to know, how do you feel about Green's power level in formats other than Commander? How do you think it's been in limited, draft, or some of the other internal formats?
Yeah, so if you go really far back, green was one of the worst colors. I'm talking, 2 decades ago or so. Laughable, like Cracklin was supposed to be a good creature or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty Randy Bueller, who pushed and said, hey, we need to make better creatures. And I think Kavu Titan is a very good example where it was pushed to be a 2-mana 2/2 or a 5-mana 5/5, because 6-mana 5/5 wasn't going to do it. And I specifically remember that card coming out and being sweet, Now green has size, that's what its thing is. And then it got pushed too far with all the flashback cards in Odyssey. It had Shower the Squirrel and Call the Herd and Beast Attack and Roar the Worm and Basking Urwalla and Arrogant Worm. So, if you give green all the best stuff all the way curved, yes, it actually becomes the best color. Anyway, but more recently, we are doing a good job with green. I would say the pain points are, as Magic gets more and more mature, we want more interaction in the game. In particular, when we're doing something like best of 1 games on Arena or something like that, or lots of casual play where there's no sideboards, green is actually like the worst color interaction. That's one of a mainstay it's supposed to have. It will have the least tools at your disposal to stop your opponent from whatever they're doing. And Veil of Summer is probably the best example of an interactive green card that's over the line, right, as far as getting banned in multiple formats. But that card in particular was trying to push a little more interaction in green. I have an idea or two that are safer to push, okay, but I will say that that's a point where it's gone too far recently, is trying to make interactive things that mess your opponent up, that are still green without actually being overbearing.
Just sort of to develop on that a little bit. I'm curious about sort of where the line is for green creature removal and what the current restrictions are on what green creature removal can do.
Right. So fight was invented in Innistrad by Eric Lauer to give a sort of clean verb to say, hey, my creature, your creature, who's going to win? I have the better creature. We allow green to do that. Previously, you had to have like a provoke ability or like force a block or something like that. And
Yeah.
messy with things that can tap. Because a lot of times you're going to lose because of some utility creature on the other side of the board. Like very frequently, some kind of mana elf is actually the best green creature in standard,
Yeah.
and you can
Mhm.
never can ever do anything about it, right? That's bad. So we want some kind of interaction with creatures for green. Creatures are super important. They're so important, we're willing to give green something for it. In particular, a mono green mirror match, right? We don't want it to just be whose hand happens to curve exactly correct wins, right? We would like you to make some decisions on disrupting your opponent. So we allow the fight ability, my creature, your creature fight. We want you to have a creature to start with, though, if you're going to get to cast it for super cheap. We will let you have your creature deal its power to another creature again with a spell. So you need a creature first. You can't just on an empty board stop your opponent's dragon from racing across and killing you.
Mhm.
And then once you get further up the curve, we will let you have creatures that innately fight with themselves. And a lot of times this is to make powerful enough creatures that you will draft instead of some other powerful cards. So the sticking point here is, would you take Air Elemental over it, right? A Somberwald Stag, some creature like that. And oftentimes we put extra green pips in it, right? And the short answer is it's hard to get you
Yeah.
to pick a green creature when you could just have some murdering demon that kills something, right, when it enters.
Mhm.
Mhm.
To sort of prop up some of that and get people to switch colors, we have to make sure that whatever green, uncommon, or rare creature can actually tussle with the best creatures of the other colors. And it often means you need some kind of card advantage or tempo attached to it.
Mm.
So is the intent generally that because it's this removal is tied to a creature in some way that your opponents can interact with it? Like if they have a Doom Blade and kill the creature in response, that they can sort of prevent your removal from happening? Is that sort of the goal?
Yeah, we want the creature to matter in that you can wield your size in your strength, which is green's got the very best as far as strength in creatures goes. So yes, if you
Mhm.
try to fight and your creature gets unsummoned or destroyed or burned, or the other creature somehow becomes stronger, right, or indestructible, or something else, or has death touch or something cool, right? Then it should all matter. A card that went over the line I think, is the wolf that eats food, right, for indestructible. At the time, it was like food. You should get some reward for this. However, when you are a creature fighting and you have indestructible, it's like you have infinite toughness, right? Just like a creature with death touch would have infinite power for the purposes of fighting other creatures. So we have these
Mhm.
mantras of don't try to assemble a non-pie thing from your pie. Like don't make a green creature with death touch and indestructible that enters the battlefield and fights something, because that's a chupacabra, or right. It's a
Yeah.
different card. It's probably a black card,
Yeah.
right? So in this interaction is really important. So that's why I'm bringing up these interactive cards in green, because they're the ones that towed over the line, because that's where we identified a need in the game to push. We pushed and we pulled back a little bit, but we definitely need our games to have interaction in them, and we're
Mm.
trying to slice it exactly right.
I'm gonna try not to like focus too much on specific cards going forward, but there is one I wanted to sort of get your opinion on since we are talking about things that maybe go over the line in this space. The card Kamal's Will from Commander Legends. If you have your commander on the battlefield, it makes any number of target lands you control 1/1s with indestructible, and then each creature you control deals damage equal to its power to that creature. So it's sort of seems like it's like the end result is basically deal damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control plus the power of creatures you control. And that seems like something that's a little bit harder to interact with in the way that you could interact with like a Somber Waltz stag. Is that something that's sort of over the line?
We need the card to have 2 modes that are compelling, right? And we found that if we just let people animate their lands, they don't like doing that because they can all die, right?
Mm-hmm.
The indestructible part is there for a reason that is not have to do with we should have things fight and be indestructible or whatever, right? That's there for a different reason, as a feel good reason. You do have to have your commander in play to do both.
Okay.
But I mean, it is towing the line a little bit. I mean, there's other cards that say they're free if you have your commander too, right? The power gradient commander is higher, a little higher in general. If we pull back too much on the cards that are specifically for commander, they're more like they're blanks.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
that sort of leads into my next question. How do the rules of commander affect green's strengths and weaknesses? How does green play out in the commander format?
something that happens when you have 40 life to play with and many opponents to kill is suddenly you need way more resources to take out the table than you do in a 1v1, right? So this is why mana ramp is integral. I get plenty of feedback from players about this all the time. And so suddenly it becomes king to not only ramp an extra mana, but to actually play all the cards that ramp you 2 more mana, right? There's a bunch of 4 mana cards that give you 2 mana, and you can even play the 6 mana cards that give you 3 mana, right? So you actually don't stop. You can play Hedron Archive and then Dreamstone Hedron, right? And you can actually get a lot from those. So the main point that green is aided by is acquiring more resources or just enough resources to defeat all your opponents. I found that doubling your mana is kind of just enough to get you to beat all your opponents, right? If you can play something like that. Nissa, who the world, right? Like a Mirari's Wake is usually enough to get you ahead, enough to suddenly play the archenemy and defeat everybody. Another thing is you suddenly can all the huge numbers on your creatures, which we love to give to green cards. We want them to be the biggest ones. Like the 7th, 8th, 12th, 13th power starts mattering, right? Instead of being overkill in a 20 life format. And the other piece of the pie is we also let you draw cards in green if they're tied to your creatures. And since you were ramping anyway, you've got the other part of card draw that becomes the formula to win, because your opponent's life total is something that you don't need to deal with initially at the start. You can figure it out after you've already accrued all your resources. So we definitely know that green is ahead on many axes here when it comes to commander. I'm sort of the one in the council meetings that has to say pull back. Other people try to more, right? They're like, let's give white some more ways to draw cards if that's even possible. Let's try to give red some like resource accumulation cards, right? Instead of just throwing everything at one opponent and then being out of gas. So I usually have to say back on some green cards, like don't actually write everything. When we make a new primeval bounty, like it just does everything, right? Anyway, I have a strange position where I'm actually beating up a lot of green cards compared to what other council members are having to do with.
I mean, is that because it's like fun to design green card? Like, it feels like it's fun to design green cards.
You figured it out. This is from Ian Duke, who's, as Magic has grown in age and we made lots and lots of cards, we have lots of players, right? We want to keep everyone happy. Richard Garfield initially said, hey, here's a creature, here's a land, here's an instant, here's a sorcery, right? Here's an enchantment, play with your cards. And then he also had destroy a creature, destroy an enchantment, destroy a land, right? Nice little stone rain. That was just the normal thing to do, right? Blow up a blue card or island, blow up a red card or a mountain, right? It's just like there was acid rains, blue cards that blow up all the forest, right? There was just, it was not sacred. Okay? Making your opponent discard cards at random, that wasn't, like, you can make them discard, you can counter their, blow up their lands. But over time, we've pulled way back on countering every card your opponent ever plays, making them discard every card they could ever draw, right? And blowing up all their lands they could ever play, right? So we've pulled way back on all those. And because the green mechanics are the fun mechanics where you make some mana, get some lands, make some creatures, make some tokens, put a bunch of counters on them, enchant them, make them all stronger, right? Double them in power and toughness, and crash in and hit your opponent for 100 damage, right? Those are all the fun things to do. Gain a bunch of life in the process. So because of fun over time, yes, green has been relatively intact over time and just had its stuff pushed. I will say that it used to be that green was supposed to get all the big creatures, you know, like Force of Nature and stuff like that. However, Magic is just more fun. Every color has amazing large creatures, right? So lots of angels are super amazing and powerful, and dragons are pushed, right? Some vampires and demons and stuff are pushed. Some sphinxes get pushed, right? So that suddenly didn't become sacred. That, hey, if you were going to cast a 6 mana creature or a 7 mana creature or a 10 mana creature or whatever it is, that the best one was going to be green. Well, now all the colors get amazing creatures on the high end of the curve because it's just a more fun game that way.
That kind of leads into some of the next questions, but I guess how has green's color pie changed in recent years?
Yeah, so recently the interaction point is one of the most important things. We've pulled back on specifically like 1 mana green creatures that generate mana. It's now a pretty rare thing that will make one, just to try to pull the reins back on standard. Like we tried to make a Birds of Paradise in Dominaria, right? I was on that set and I was like, this is gonna fly, right? I will say that the color fixing is another thing that's spilled over into other colors. So like we now print dual lands in 5s and often 10s, right? It used to be that you needed a green card of a Lay of the Land or a Birds of Paradise or something like that. A Fertile Ground would be a great way to fix your colors, and it would cost you a mana or 2 or something. But now we make lots and lots of dual lands, so it's just a good idea to let lots of different 2 and often 3 color decks work. That's not been that recent, but over time we've been treating all the 2 color pairs more and more fairly. The only other part is probably the interaction part, to push a little bit there. We've been trying, and green's the one that's we've been trying to siphon off a little bit, perhaps, right? Try to make sure that white has the better enchantment cards, and it's not enchantresses, you know, in green are the best rewards, right? We would like that the other colors have stuff that's for them.
I mean, that also, you're segueing this so easily for me. Green has had its card draw tied to creatures. Enchantments, it's had them tied to lands entering the battlefield. So, like, creatures with the Great Henge, enchantments with Citizen Champion, lands with Tireless Tracker, like investigating. So is drawing cards when permanents enter the battlefield part of green's color pie? Or is it more that green has, like an affinity for these things?
It's more that green can draw cards when tied to creatures. However, this is probably something that could be pulled back on a little bit. I cast a Shamanic Revelation like last week, and it drew like 13 cards. And I said, I don't know if this is quite right, because one card can make many tokens, right? And I said, hey, you know, this is a relatively generous thing for this color to have. Permanents entering the battle is less. It's not the important part. It's the fact that Tireless Tracker is a creature, okay? But that card is another example of the card drawing on the green card was better than like the card drawing on the blue cards. But often happens when we make a new mechanic or make, you know, some kind of a new clue token, and we want something to be cool and hit. So the repeated clue generation on that particular green card was proved to be too generous while also making the tracker stronger, right? So it's not that lands entering the battlefield is from creatures that have landfall on them. That's kind of another place that's been pushed because we just, you know, make another Zendikar set, right? So players want landfall. I was playing on Spell Table with my landfall deck, and I played someone who had the same color landfall deck, and their deck was just way better than mine. It turns out that being playing lands, which is something you want to do anyway, we don't have to keep bribing you too hard to get you to play all your lands. So it's more that green likes lands, give them nice landfall abilities. Tireless Tracker happened to be a creature. It's not that you
Mhm.
just play permanents, you draw cards. That's not the demarcation there. I do feel like that
Mhm.
letting you just draw raw
Mhm.
cards based on the number of creatures you have is probably better for a gold effect. But I do think it's cool when you have like Rishkar's Expertise or Soul's Majesty that like draw equal to your like a really big or a
Yeah.
Life's Legacy. Like I do think that that's very green to have a very large creature, and that is a way to draw your cards. But just having a huge wide board of tokens, we're trying to let white do more of that. Okay, not specifically reward it so much in green. So, like I said, I'm often
Mhm.
here having to say, pull back on maybe this green card, try to let the white card do it better, try to let the blue card do it better, stuff like that. That's just very normal, everyday activity, by the way, council.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, and you mentioned a moment ago enchantresses and maybe letting white get a bit more of that like enchantment loving part of the color pie. So like, is Cetessan champion? Are we going to see fewer cards like this in the future, maybe, or maybe more often see them in white?
When we make enchantment linear sets, like Theros Beyond Death is, green does like enchantments. Although the sticking point I try to make is that, white should have more rewards for having enchantments,
Mm.
and hopefully the best ones as well. When we make a set that is linear, such as enchantments, or it likes artifacts, or it likes the graveyard, or something like that, you're going to see more of the rewards in the colors that we're allowing to do that. But I mean, it's just this is
Hmm.
sort of a sum thing. In general, people don't place sums of all the enchantment linears in a set. They play certain cards, right? So we often
Yeah.
print stuff and then we adjust after the fact if people happen to like certain tools more than others. It's a collectible card game, right? You
Mhm.
get to pick what you want, right? I'm a game designer, but I actually don't tell you what to play with. You can pick what you want. If everyone is always picking
Mhm.
all the green cards for a thing when we would like them to pick the white cards at least half of the time, right? Then we need to adjust something.
Yeah. Kind of in that same vein, you're talking about green getting two things and maybe like reining some of that in. Green currently has like single target, like large pump, like a +4/+4 on a creature and overrun effects at the same time. Is that just going to be something that we continue to see for forever? Is green going to have multi-target and single target pump as long as green exists, do you think?
Hopefully the green lasts forever. By the way, I'm I
Oh, yeah. Oh,
a hole
definitely.
that we have here a hole that we have here at Wizards is we feel we have stewardship right over something bigger than ourselves. I do
Mhm.
feel like the game will last generations and generations, okay, and it's up to me to keep it fun and keep it going.
You've been doing a good job.
We've learned, I mean, I mentioned a few hiccups and you mentioned some more hiccups, but I will say that you've picked a category of card that might actually just be the most fun card, right? Like Giant Growth. The card is really, really
Yeah.
high on the. This is one of the most fun cards in the entire game, and the game would be far worse off without instant
Mhm.
like pump effects. We actually slice it. It may not be obvious. I'm glad you asked questions like this. We actually want the white tricks to be better when they are small, and we want the green tricks to be better when they are big. So, for example, +1, +0, +1, +1,
Hmm.
maybe +2, +1, +1, +2, +2, +2, +2, +3. Like those kinds of things. We actually like the white cards to be better. 1 mana, 2 mana, instant tricks. They should win more combats, I guess I'll say.
Mhm.
Like, and we also grant lots of keywords on those white tricks, right? If you ever felt like the white tricks have kind of gotten
Yeah.
better over time, it's because they probably have. And then we'd like +3s
Mhm.
and +4s and all those really big numbers to be on the green cards. That way you can trade up really high on the curve, right? Instead of tussles with creatures of similar mana cost, right? Where a small effect is actually all you need. You'd rather just pay a single mana to do it or get a cantrip out of it or some life from a lifelink or whatever bonus you have. We want the white cards to be better. But once the numbers are big, we like the green cards to be better. And they're fun because you can attack a tiny creature and do a big one and size all the way up, or actually hit your opponent for a lot of damage, which is also fun too. But I think all the colors do want instant attacks. I think dive down or something is a crazy blue trick. So
Oh yeah.
we want the combat to be dynamic and interesting and scary, and you don't quite know what's going to happen. So those are all super important. It makes the game fun every turn. It makes the game have a bunch of hidden information that matters if there actually are tricks. And then it also makes it watchable, right? In coverage, right? So the instant speed tricks, there is a delineation there. And it's pretty similar in that pumping your team +1 or +2 or +2/+1 is some of the fun numbers, is usually more white, in that there will be more of them probably printed. And then once you get to big numbers, we actually are happy with green giving +3, +4. Doubling, I guess, is a green thing. So we try to put the little numbers on the white cards and the bigger numbers on the green cards, at least on the team pumps.
I've got sort of like two follow-up questions to that. One is sort of like, if you have like an overrun effect, it tends to, in a way, it can reward having like more small creatures in terms of the fact that you're just getting more total power pumped. If you've got like 3 1/1s versus 1 3/3 versus, something like a giant growth that just makes one thing larger. So for me, like green having both these overrun effects and these giant growth effects make it a little bit confusing as to whether green is supposed to be like the go tall color with like the biggest creatures, or the go wide color with like a lot of small creatures, and like appropriate rewards for that.
Right. So we need to make clean cards fun cards. It is fun to actually cast some thing that pulls all your team and swings, and you actually hit them for way too much damage, right? That's fun too.
Yeah.
The point where we is probably going wrong here is when the green cards are making too many tokens. And so we've trying to adjust to where the white cards make more of the tokens and the green cards make larger tokens. So every color does get to make tokens. They're super fun. You can actually personalize what your token is, how you represent on the battlefield. But we're trying to pull back on the like beacons of creation that just spam the whole board with tons of 1/1s, right? That are green cards,
Yeah.
and try to white better at wide and green token making better at tall. It doesn't always land that way, and there's history too. You can play the cards from the past. I had a Suzuki Summons, right, beacon deck, right, that was going quite wide. But that's where I would point out that probably needs to be pulled back, is not that overruns are conflicted or unfair. It's more that the white wides should be wider and the green things that make tokens should be taller.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that development. I think like Scoot Swarm might be, it'd be great to see something like that in white. Like it'd be great to have like the white token generation be in the one that crashes arena.
Yeah, we actually mentioned that in a meeting, that hey, perhaps this thing that generates tons of 1/1 tokens, we should just recognize that even if it's flavorfully a green card, even if it's a riff on a previous green card, let's have more discipline to make the best 1/1 token generating card a white card. Yeah, we specifically said what you just said in a meeting.
Oh, that's funny. So it's basically like Selesnya or like white green is gonna look a lot like what like classic
tokens.
Yeah, like white
produces the overruns.
Exactly. So it's gonna like traditional like old school overrun lists are gonna probably be more concentrated in white green in the future is kind of the goal, it sounds like.
Yeah, we would like it if you had a reason to play one color with the other color, right? So that's another reason that maybe over cool if they're better with your white cards, right? We love stuff like that. If you play bounce with your blue cards and you make your opponent discard them with your black cards, that's all amazing, fun gameplay that needs to be in the game as much as humanly possible, right? We want our players to make lots of combos happen on their own that they come up with. They feel really smart. So yes, now like when the chips fall down, if this plane happens to only have tiny snakes on it or something, we might have to do extra heavy lifting to try to
Mhm.
fit what we want our cars mechanically to do creatively, right? We can't keep printing the same thing all the time. Each world is a little different. But yes, we're well aware of, like, I like the green Stompy deck in Standard, right? The Love Struck Beast and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Your creatures going on adventures, and you get
Mhm.
some value. Play them early, and they do extra when you play them late, right? So we want a mono deck to play a certain way and have a hole or two in its game plan, and you can make them different when you add the other colors.
Mhm.
Well, I wanted to just follow up on something you said a little while ago. You mentioned that thinking about it, that like maybe shamanic revelation type effects might make more sense as multicolor. What two color combinations specifically were you thinking of for that kind of effect?
Possibly blue and green, maybe white and green, just not mono green, okay? Not just with bonuses
Hmm.
on top of it. It's possible green's supposed to be more like draw a card for all the 3 power creatures and higher you have, right? Or 3 power and or 3 toughness creatures you have, right? Just to be like, hey, size is a thing. If you want to just get rewarded for
Hmm.
any creatures at all, especially when they're going wide, is the best thing to do. Combine it with something else, right? Now, most sets have some color that has a token theme or a color pair in it, right? We build all our sets now to have, at least 10 draft archetypes. It's more that it seems over the line that you get to ramp all the mana you want in Commander with green cards, and then draw all the cards you want too after playing your awesome creatures, because we're giving all the pieces that you need, right?
Hmm.
So if we could pull back anywhere, it's
Yeah.
probably not having a giant creature and drawing equal to its power. It's probably not like Beast Whisper, which is like cast creature spells is good, right? We do like you to have actual creature cards that you're actually casting instead of some thing that's spitting out tokens every turn, right? So I guess if I had to pick anywhere, that might be
Yeah.
a place to pull back on and say, let this be a more special thing, right? We don't let you destroy any permanent that's actually not in a color. You
Hmm.
actually need more than one color to do that effect, right? So just thinking
Mhm.
about it, time of where green might have it too nice is that's a place I've been thinking about, but I haven't put anything into motion. I'm just bringing up that I know that green's ahead in Commander. It is almost attributed to the rules of the format plus the fact that lots of fun things are green that have just been given a generosity
Mhm.
Hmm.
at it. So where to be a little less generous is sort of on has been in
Mhm.
my mind for a while now.
Yeah. A lot of times, like Legacy, Commander, Eternal formats are kind of just like a collection of the sins of the past. So.
That's right. Beast Within is my sin of the past. Yeah, I made Beast Within as in New Phyrexia, it was trying to be color bleedy, and that card is just played a ton, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was me trying to be like, what if each color bled a little bit to make it feel evil, right? To feel violating, because that's the bad guys, right? So white has some life loss in there. Elishnorn shrinks
Yeah.
the opponent's creatures, which is not white, or at least barely white, on like a card from the dark.
Yeah.
That's a
Mhm.
little color bleedy, but now we're a little more careful with our color bleediness. We try to make it pop when it is, and we try to make it for a special reason. So, like, this character has a power suite. A good example might be like how Kiora
Hmm.
has this bubble effect, right? On one of the Kioras, Crashing Wave, I think. And
Yeah.
so it prevents damage to
Hmm.
creatures, right? But it's a blue card and a green card, and the green cards can fog, right? However, what would we ever do that effect in the game otherwise? Protect this one creature for the whole turn in a damage prevention way. I have other examples too. I don't really want to spoil everything and give it all away. I think it's nice when there's some mystique
Yeah.
to it. I was hoping that players would feel some of the color pop
Mhm.
happening and not have it dictated to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to be all doom and gloom of bad stuff, the harbinger of bad things. So something to push on perhaps is, I don't know if you've ever watched any fantasy at all, but whenever there's some character that is wielding a wooden staff, and has something like I'm wearing right now, a nice green cloak, right? They look like a forest mage, be a movie or a video game or anything. They always have the ability to like make thorns and bushes grow real fast and like capture your feet, stop you.
Hmm.
However, it's always non-lethal, right? And I'm just looking at it and say, what card is that, right?
Yeah.
Something the council also does that may not be obvious is there's increasingly more brand expressions, right? Magic Legends came out. Maybe it's not a card game, it's a Magic IP something, but we still want there to be colors in it, right? And so instead of it being green can return any card from a graveyard, because green is really good at cycles of life and the past and history and stuff like that. However, make sure to not let you get back a spell, an instant or sorcery, because that's really loopy, right? That's kind of the reason green can get back any card in its graveyard, is because it actually has like the worst instant sorceries that would be good at looping. But none of that makes any sense if it's like a first person shooter or something like that, right? So it's more like green can buff its creatures and make them more powerful, right? And summon the largest creature to the battlefield. You can generate extra mana or resources, whatever it happens to be in the game, right? But something that would be cool is the whole like I make a bunch of thorns like appear, or roots, brambles, and vines, and they entangle. The character always has to take some time and break out, but it doesn't kill them actually, right? So a green spell could do that because we don't let you destroy target creature because it's called entrap in roots or something. Fog effects might work like that, prevent damage that would deal or be dealt because they're just stuck in a thing. But it feels like there could be more like that, some kind of slowing or stun kind of effect, right? That could happen because that's in every single IP that I see, where some kind of woodland forest druid like character, they always can do that power. What is that magic card? But also, what is that in a different game, a different brand expression? So that is something I'm looking to increase the power suite a little bit in that way. And that's an interaction point, right? That's the thing that is trying to be added more in green, is some interaction.
Yeah, it's great that you guys are finding new resonant ways to solve these long-term problems.
Yes, that aren't or Beast Within.
Yeah.
Which is a white card.
I wanted to ask you a bit, green obviously has some difficulties with say like answering creatures without relying on its own creatures, but there are like colorless cards, expensive colorless answers that can sort of fill in some of the gaps in green's color pie. Like you have Scour from Existence, or more recently, just today, a card was spoiled from Strixhaven that's a 5-mana colorless sorcery, Introduction to Annihilation, that exiles target non-land permanent, and its controller draws a card.
Yeah, so Scour from Existence is colorless, right? It actually costs like 7 mana, right? So it used to be the fact that if you paid enough mana, you could do it in green. Like Desert Twister is that, right? Pay enough mana, you can do it. We don't try. We try not to do that. We try not to say if you pay 8 mana, your green creature can fly. We try not to do this. If you pay enough mana on the card itself, it can break pie. The place where you can pay enough mana to do anything is on colorless cards. There's some things we probably won't do on colorless cards, like the really mean stuff. Make opponents discard a bunch of cards. It's not a colorless card likely to make or ever make. Like counter all the spells, destroy all the lands, right? So the whole you can pay mana and get away with it is actually a colorless thing. All right, it kind of sets the bar above what the color that's good at it would do it for. This specific card, if I recall it right, is destroy a non-land permanent for 5 mana. Do they get a 3/3?
They just get a card, no token.
They draw a card. That card changed a lot, if I recall. The reason it's pushed a little bit is it's trying to be this sort of answer that you might grab to kill your opponent's amazing card that's killing you in a draft, right? Or something like that. It does have compensation written on it. We like to make those white. The whole I burned your village. Here's some gold, right? I killed
Yeah.
some of your things.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch of soldiers or something to replace it. Those sort of tit for tat or compensation cards. We like to make those white. So the card is likely a white card in a vacuum if you didn't see a mana cost on it. But that particular card in Strixhaven is trying to be a lesson that you can grab in a pinch to answer something your opponent played that's beating you. That probably needs to be, significantly dangerous, meaning it's probably, 5 mana and up, something like that. You're going to be way far behind trying to defeat your opponent's 3 mana cards by playing your 5 mana, give your opponent a card removal spell, right? It's not a change in pie or a different direction. It's mostly like it serves a job.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of curious how you feel about, because green has such a strong monopoly on a lot of mana generation effects and like ramp and things like that. These colorless cards tend to be a bit better in green than they are in other colors. Like, if you're playing a mono red deck or something and trying to use this card to answer a problematic enchantment or something, that's a lot more of a hurdle to cross than if you're in a green deck and you have access to a lot of ways to increase the amount of mana you have available.
That's right. You can try to use your Scour from Existences in your mono green deck to answer problem things your opponent's doing. We have a baseline on the colorless cards for a reason. If you want to burn things with your blue deck, you can play the Moonglove extracts or whatever it happens to be, right? The colorless versions of that. That's the game. The fact that you get away with it more in green, if because you can probably get away with paying the extra mana, is fine. This Strixhaven card also gives them a card, right? You're not getting out of it all the way. It is part of the game to use the colorless cards to shore up your weaknesses. If you want to, destroy everything with some kind of big board wipe artifact, then you can do that. In fact, we like those as stopgaps so that something can't get too far out of whack, right? We think it opens the game up more. If you can suffer and play a monocolor deck and use some of these colorless cards to shore up a weakness if you have them, than it would be to not have them at all, and people may not actually play any monocolor decks at all.
No, that makes sense.
We've talked a lot about, how green just has access to some really fun parts of the color pie. Are there any green effects that R&D tends to limit out of concerns that they might lead to unfun gameplay?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we limit lots of stuff all the time. So for Commander in particular, the best mana ramp is actually, right, Soul Ring and Mana Crypt, right? Are actually better than the cards. So, I mean, you can complain all you want, but Soul Ring is doing work to actually eat things out. So a really good example is green is the best color at returning cards from its graveyard, any card at all, from its graveyard to his hand. We don't let any color do that. The reason we let you is, for the most part, the other green instants and sorceries are worse than what you would be getting back. If you could get your board wipe back or your upside counter spells back, you could sort of lock your opponent out of the game. But because green happens to not have ways to do things like take extra turns with its sorceries, right? Or counter a spell and draw a card with its green instance, right? It is actually one of the safest colors to allow that to happen, right? But what we don't want you to do is get more than one card back, right? You actually get a loop, right? So for the most part, I try really hard to make sure if we ever make cards that get things back from the graveyard with some kind of upside, like and you gain some life or something, that they actually like can't loop with each other somehow. And usually there's an exile clause on it, right? So that's a fast that I always do in files, and invariably there's some giant mythic card or something that returns a bunch of cards and things happen, and have to make sure they write the exile clause on it. Seasons Past is a green sorcery that can get back cards. And then I'm pretty sure it was Aaron Forsyth who was being
Oh, yeah.
smart and said, "Hey, I can make you not loop this card. It now goes into your deck, right?" And it took, one event before
Hmm.
I think John Finkel was getting it back out of his deck, right? So it was actually looped, right? We can try to
Yeah.
not let you loop things, but people will loop
Hmm.
it, okay? We even give you a little try. People will take all the randomness out of the game if they can get away with it. We
Hmm.
have a strange thing we do where we try not to let planeswalkers that are green ultimate if doubling season is on the battlefield. That may not be obvious, but
Mm.
we do have I do a doubling season check of, hey, would this be crazy if it could ultimate immediately with a doubling season, right? And for the most part we pull them back. I don't know what the current most ridiculous one is. It Architect of Thought? One of them, it's like you can go get a card out of everyone's deck and play it or something. I'm not sure what could get more ridiculous than that. But there's a threshold where we'll let you do it. I'm pretty sure there's a Vraska that lets you get like some assassins and stuff. And we were like, yeah, we'll let you do that. But
Yeah.
Oh, that like kill you
yeah,
when
they,
they hit
they
you.
don't kill
Yeah.
you immediately, right? You kind of need to attack. At some point, we'll have a check and say, maybe this is okay to print because it's often trying to also be a sweet finisher for a standard deck. Those are examples
Yeah.
of trying to rein in a little bit, knowing what players are want to do with their cards if we let them. Right, they will break them if we let them.
I actually was going to ask about that because it seemed from like someone who we like do set reviews all the time that the green planeswalkers in particular have been doubling season proof for a while now.
Yeah, so you've noticed.
Yeah, definitely. One of the big things that we don't necessarily need to talk about is when people talk about like allowing planeswalkers as commanders, they're always like, "Oh, well, we'd have to ban doubling season." And I am of the opinion that you wouldn't because you've been doing your job and making sure that they don't just completely go off the rails.
Well, the truth is, doubling season was made in a time before planeswalkers existed, right?
Yeah.
So that's just a function of making a game that's forwards and backwards compatible, right? Players like it that their cards do stuff
Yeah.
with the previous cards, and they also like it that the cards they currently own will do stuff with the new cards that will invariably come out in the future, right? So
Yeah.
it's all part of making one continuous game with expansions that play together. That stuff will break, and it's more of a question of, is it still fun or not?
No, that's cool. Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about green and its place in Commander and the color pie?
Yeah, so green I know is very strong in Commander. It has a important place in the color pie that has grown just from our game design purposes of having fun. We keep trying to add fun to all the colors, and green has had more than its fair share of fun. My goal is that in the near future, we can get a little more interaction in there and keep all the fun stuff. And maybe pull back on just a little bit on one or two of the things that maybe green could do without, and it would be better to give to a color that could use it or have a little different angle to it. I'm still happy with
Mhm.
playing your big artifacts if you need them to shore up a weakness. That's all good to go. Happy with green splashing all the colors to make a 5-color deck work. That's a strength. Even though we give you lots of dual lands and all the colors, all the color pairs, trying to get up past to 3, 4, and 5 colors, we still like being a green thing, right? You should think of green first if you were going to try to do that. Start with green and find your other colors. Another thing I'm trying to push on is green had trouble finding an iconic race. So it has elves, right? And you're never going to dethrone elves as far as what color are elves? Well, they're green, right? They live in the forest. So
Yeah.
hydras were being pushed for a long time to try to be a green iconic. The problem is they're cool and they grow. Like they literally have a grow mechanic. Just the mythological creature itself has a way to grow. However, they've proved
Mhm.
clunky and wordy, and similar, right? They all blend together, right? For someone who was to actually know the cards, like they actually blend together a lot. So starting with Ixalan, I've been pushing hard to try to make dinosaurs more of a green iconic thing,
Oh,
right?
cool.
So they have more
Awesome.
things they can do. A dinosaur could be small, it could
Yeah.
be mean, it could be huge, right? And the very largest creatures on Earth, right, were some giant sauropod, right, from the past. So it's not
Yeah.
as fantastical as an angel or a demon are, or a dragon, right? But I'm hoping that some of the pushes that you can see, maybe there's a sweet dinosaur in more sets than you might have been expecting, is possibly me trying to push on and say, hey,
Yeah.
let's make the largest creature a dinosaur here, or try to make this one super cool, right? Because they have much more diverse things you can do.
Hmm.
That's a contribution I've been trying to do ever since Ixalan came out.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are really excited about dinosaurs, so I'm glad that we're going to get to see more of them in the future.
Right. There were very, very few of them up until Ixalan hit, and so I'm hoping that the gloves are off and we can
Yeah.
make them in lots of our settings, even if there's just one of them stomping around, being the biggest thing that your opponent could possibly play against you. That's an important thing to maintain. Is size is a green thing. In particular, having size and
Yeah.
like they're equal, like 9, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, right?
Mm-hmm. No real ball lightnings in green. We want like that nice even power toughness combo.
Yeah, less ground breakers, more gigantosauruses. That's a very good analogy.
Yeah. Well, cool.
What's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you if they'd like to continue the conversation?
Ooh, so you can get me on my Twitter is probably the best place. Nice public. I'm at NORRYTT. That's hard to spell. Again, NORRYTT. It's Norit. It's a magic card where I had to change the I to a Y because it was taken.
No.
That's a public setting. I do read my thread. I can't reply to everything, but I gauge more on a barometer of how well we're doing by the levels of applause and the levels of boos. But this is all important stuff. The game's only getting bigger with more brand expressions and more cards coming out. I'm just hope I make a great game for all of you to play and to continue to enjoy.
Well, you've been doing an awesome job. I got to tell you, Eldritch Moon is actually my favorite set of all time.
Yeah.
I just love that cosmic horror flavor, and I really think you knocked that one out of the park.
Yeah, we went off on the deep end pretty hard
Mm-hmm.
with my. I had this terrible PowerPoint animation of Gisela, right, and Bruna, and they combine into a Brazella. And I made a lot of people angry in our digital expressions of trying to figure out how to make one card and another card become one card and then break apart again. But the melding cosmic horror thing is a cool idea, a good way to twist on Innistrad.
Yeah, no, I think some of your leads when there was still two sets drafted together were like some of my favorite draft environments. So it's really cool to get to talk to you. Like I think about Fate Reforged all the time, all the time. So yeah, it's really cool to actually get to hear your takes on everything.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show, Ken. It's been a real pleasure, and really appreciate all your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and Zach. I hope to hear from my other council members as well. They can get up here and defend their colors and say why they're the best. When we know that green is the best.
Yeah. Rad. Well, cool. Well, have a good night. We'll talk to you later, or hopefully talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ken.
Okay, really quick before we get going, it is Zach here to say thank you to our Patreon patrons. So that is Gustav, Ryan, Mark, Eamon, Addison, Mason, Rick, Laser, Raphael, Charlotte, The White Clays, Hannah, Anthony, Andy, Dylan, James, Justin, Logan, Roger, Evan, Bryce, Dylan, Benjamin, Jamie, Matthew, Jason, Kyle, Brandon, Kydell, Jeremy, Russell, Troy, Dylan, Walter, Leo, Ian, John, Tom, Kevin, and Micah. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. We could not do stuff like this interview without your support, like almost literally. So thank you very much. And we are excited to do some more stuff like this in the future. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
If any of you theorists want to get in touch with us, I am at Commander Theory on Twitter and Tumblr, and Zach is at Fat Bartleby on Twitter. Our theme song is Lincoln Continental by Entropy, and you can check them out on SoundCloud. Until next time, we're going back to the drawing board.